We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here
Rob
with
H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Yes, many questions this week, and we're gonna dig right into it. Tuesday morning, here we go.
Tuesday morning. Yes, we're starting late because of me, and to all the people who are listening to this podcast on Monday afternoon, that's probably when I will post.
Oh, I see.
Because
You're gone for a while, aren't you?
I've got a 2-day training I'm doing in Oregon on Thursday and Friday. I'm taking a red eye back, so I'll be back at like 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, which should put me in good stead to be completely annihilated for the entire weekend.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
We'll see what happens with the podcast. We'll see.
Oh, dear.
So, no promises. Sorry, guys. Life. All these things. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant to see our videos. Contact us directly. It's rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @firstreflect. I'm tom@avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_tom. Let's start by thanking our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you support the podcast in some way. And we start with this week, we're going to thank our 106 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon is a service where you can sign up for a subscription to your content creators of choice. Any number of them. There's a minimum of $1 per creator, a maximum of infinity dollars, I suppose, one would guess.
Yep. Keep adding them zeros. We won't mind.
Yep. So then they'll take that amount out of your account every month and give most of it to your content creators of choice. And if you choose us, we will thank you. And we do this week. So thank you to our patrons.
Yeah, patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up. Think of it as a voluntary subscription if you please. And thanks so much to our 106 patrons over there.
I'm still yawning. I'm sorry for all the video people.
Yeah, hopefully our video is mostly fixed this week. Made the effort. We'll see what it turns out like.
Yeah. I had a physical therapy appointment for my shoulder. My shoulder's been hurting me, and I wasn't sure if it was going to fall off or not. 7 o'clock in the morning, so I had to drive, about 30 minutes away. So Tommy is a little sleepy this morning. So if you can't support the podcast financially, we understand. We've all been in that situation before. And if you can support us in some way, just let us know what you did so we can recognize you here on the podcast. So we're going to start with Tony. Tony wrote a lovely email to SVS saying that we convinced him to take a chance on SVS. Now, our interviews have been very helpful. Of course, listening to Gary makes me want to buy his stuff too. So now he feels like his SVS speaker system equals the upgrade he got on the video side when he got his 77-inch OLED.
Ah, nice.
So I don't know what he had before, but SVS felt like an OLED to his ears.
That's right.
So there you go.
Hey, there's new marketing for them. You can take that for free, right. SVS. We're like OLED for
there you go, SVS. OLED for SVS is OLED for your ears.
Sounds good.
And the 1% of the people who know what you're talking about will be very impressed.
Well, thank you, Tony.
Yeah, and Joe. A while back, we told Joe to at least move his 2 DefTech SuperCube subs from the front of his room and hopefully to the midpoints of his side walls, but we said that was never going to get the tactile and truly deep 20 hertz bass he was hoping for. They just don't do that. But I think he must have had a big room too.
It was like open on the left side,
open,
shifted over. Yeah.
So he tried the sidewall placement and noticed some difference, but he was still underwhelmed. Our recent SVS interview convinced him to try giving them a call. They spent 20 minutes going through his questions, and he settled on a pair of their new PB2000 Pro subs. Wow! Holy shake my couch, Batman! I added the Batman part, but the rest of it was from him. Right. He cannot believe what he's been missing all this time, and now he wants to rewatch every movie he owns. Furthermore, SVS spent another 30 minutes on the phone with him, making sure every aspect of his setup was correct. He can't praise them enough. He also got their sound path isolation feat, and he made sure to let SVS know that he wouldn't have even known about their products or been convinced to try them without us. So thank you very much. Scrolling up. Joe.
Yeah, Joe, thank you very much. And congratulations. Very happy to hear about your end results.
Yeah.
That is exactly the sort of stuff that we're hoping to achieve for people. That's the whole point of the podcast, to be honest. So that's very, very nice. And yeah. Thanks very much for all the support. Anybody who would like to give a one-time donation, if you don't want to sign up for Patreon for automatic monthly, you can do that via PayPal. So just come to our website, avrant.com. On the right-hand side, it says support AVRant. There's a lovely picture of a cup of coffee that Tom made all by himself. And
all by my lonesome.
Click on that, and it'll take you to PayPal, and you can hand over a one-time donation if you'd like to do so.
I am way too proud of that stupid graphic.
Why not? You're allowed to be.
I'm afraid to use Photoshop again for fear that my results won't be that good. It's kind of like that one time. Actually, our foreign exchange student, I taught her how to play solitaire yesterday, and she played it for the first time and won. I was like, first of all, hate you. Second of all, don't ever play again because you have 100% solitaire win streak. I mean, that's your record in solitaire, and it's never going to get any better than that. In the news, Redbox launched their Redbox Free Live TV. It's an ad-supported live TV only available on their website and mobile apps for the moment, although they say they'll expand to smart TVs, Apple TV, and Roku soon. No major broadcasters, though. It's a smaller niche channel. So that's what you can get. So the small, which, like what?
What did they mention? I can't even remember offhand. There was like, what is that? TMZ? TMZ was on there for sure.
Okay.
And
is TMZ a channel? I thought it was a program.
No, they have their own channel. There's like USA Today, which I thought was like a magazine, but I guess there's a TV channel. I don't know. Anyway, it's not major stuff, but it's free with their ads like you see on their broadcast anyway, so I'm not really sure how it's entirely different. Maybe there's like extra ads on the side of their website or something. Anyway, it's out there. Redbox, another place you can go for content.
But clearly, Redbox is trying to transition to streaming to stay afloat, which getting discs these days is getting harder and harder. That's for sure. From the comments, or first comment, I guess, only comment, Herb from Crossmetric Lab says he's grateful for us telling people to buy calibrated new mic once, but he wants to let everyone know that the COVID-19 outbreak in China has caused production and shipping COVID.
Okay, so that's the official name of coronavirus, right? Because coronavirus is the whole class of viruses that just cause the common cold. So they have, that's the official name now is COVID-19 for this new coronavirus that's been causing a scare in the media as we're talking about this, worrying about the outbreak. So it has affected production in China, unfortunately.
So he's out of stock at the moment. It looks like it'll be a while before more stock arrives, but check back with him.
Definitely. Yep. But I mean, Herb's a great guy. He's upfront about it. He's like, he's not gonna pull the wool over anybody's eyes. It's like, hey,
he's not gonna take your money and tell you it's shipping, like so many other companies.
So we're sorry for anyone who was hoping to get one right away because they wanted to start using Room EQ Wizard, today, or hey, maybe they wanted to connect it to their new monoprice HTP1, which doesn't come with its own microphone if you want to use Dirac, or hey, supposedly Arcam's pre-pro with Dirac actually got Dirac in its update. That's the news on Arcam's pre-pro. So
Herb could take your money and say that you'll get the microphone via firmware update coming soon.
If he's on Emotiva's time schedule, we'll see you in about 6 years. But anyway, yes, that's unfortunate, but do check back.
At least
check
we know.
Their website. He'll post there as soon as he's got more stock. But thank you, Herb, for the update. It's good for us to know that.
Yes. All right, Brian on Twitter. This is our first question here. Brian got a new JVC NX7 genuine 4K projector. He used Projector Central's calculator to figure out his throw distance, and he mounted the projector 12 feet 11 inches from lens to screen. All right, if he aligns the left and right sides of the image with the borders of his silver ticket screen, the top and bottom of the image are short by a couple of inches, but if he aligns the top and bottom edges, the image bleeds over onto the sides of the frame What's up with that?
Yeah, this has been brought up before, but want to mention it again because we are recommending these JVC 4K projectors quite frequently these days. This will apply to Sony's genuine 4K projectors as well. The key is they are true 4K, not Ultra HD resolution, which means it's 2160 pixels from top to bottom, just like an Ultra HD display, but instead of 3840 pixels from left to right, which is what you'll get on your flat panel, your 16:9 Ultra HD display is 3840 by 2160. Genuine 4K is 4096 from left to right, and not 3840. There are more pixels from left to right. It's basically 17:9 instead of 16:9. That's the DCI theater standard, is 4096 by 2160, and that's
so would
what
those
these are.
extra pixels just be black anyway?
That's right. They will just be black all the time. But what you want to do is align the top and bottom of your image within your 16:9 screen frame, and you will have black bars projected onto the left and right black parts of your frame, to the left and right of the image. But it's worth mentioning because this comes up from time to time. And people are like, what the heck is going on? Why doesn't this fit perfectly in my screen? Am I doing something wrong with my alignment or setup? Nope, there's 4096 instead of 3840 going across, and that's the reason.
So no matter what zoom he uses or adjustments he makes to the lens settings, the top and bottom of the image never quite get all the way to the border of his 120-inch screen. They're just a tiny bit short. Mm-hmm. Both JVC and his dealer said the image size should be possible from his 12-foot, 11-inch mounting distance. He measured with a laser, so he's pretty sure he's got all the distances correct. He wound up taking down the mount, beefed up a span between a couple of ceiling joists he had previously mounted directly to a joist, and used a decorative 4-inch square to conceal the new hole in the ceiling. Actually looks better than the original mount now, and it's strong enough for him to hang off of it with all of his body weight. So the mount is moved back about 3 inches now, and that was enough to get the top and the bottom of the image to meet the borders of his frame. But why didn't it work? Why didn't it work the first time? Projector Central's calculator, his dealer, and JVC themselves all said it should have been okay.
Yeah, so when he first wrote this to me, I was like, did you have a screen larger than 120? Because if you look at Projector Central's calculator, unfortunately, I mean, what their number is accurate when they say that from 12 feet 11 inches, the largest screen you can throw is 130 inches diagonal. But it's 130 inches diagonal, including the 4096 pixels, not the 3840 pixels. So it's actually a little larger in the diagonal than the 16:9 image that it would throw. But if the lens of your projector, this JVC, is exactly 12 feet 11 inches away from your screen, it should be able to throw, by the calculations, a 122-inch diagonal 16:9 screen. That's what the calculator says. That's what the numbers in the JVC manual say. And so 120 inches should be possible, and everybody is agreeing on that. The only real possibility here, I guess there's two. One, somehow you weren't actually 12 feet 11 inches from the screen originally. It was a couple inches closer. And again, when we're talking about projected images, a couple inches can make a big difference because like 3 inches farther back, apparently, is entirely enough to make this tiny little gap difference. The other is, I mean, we are talking about a zoom lens where you are going right up to the widest possible amount of that zoom lens. Maybe some kind of, tolerance in the manufacturing. I wouldn't really expect that to be the case. No. I think the most likely is that somehow you weren't actually exactly 12 feet 11 inches from lens to screen. For example, the front of the projector is a little bit curved, and maybe you had your laser measurement like against the edge, which means that the lens itself is like a little bit in front of that. It's a tiny amount, but it might have been just enough.
So when you measure that, do you measure that directly from the lens itself, the front of the lens, directly straight forward to the wall, or do you measure it down towards the center of the screen?
Straightforward.
Because if he measured it,
you're right.
Down,
ceiling mount towards the center of the screen, that could be enough. You're right.
That angle right there would have added at least a couple inches.
That's right.
That would be my guess.
And like you said, moving the projector physically it wasn't even a full 3, it was like 2.8 inches, I think he said, or something in his tweet. It was like a pretty small amount, but it was enough that now the top and bottom can get aligned. So I really think that's all it was, that the distance that was measured with that laser measurement device just wasn't quite exactly 12 feet 11 inches in reality.
So his screen is a 120-inch Silvertech fixed frame with their matte white material. His old Epson 3020 never had any issues, but this new JVC is seeing a lot of sort of sparkling or solid white, I guess sparkling with a solid white or light gray images. His JVC isn't even as bright as his Epson 3020 used to be. So he's seeing, there's an image here. I can see these little sparkles, but I'm guessing this is not from the projector as far. I mean, that's the screen itself. It sounds like it's more of a maybe an HDMI issue here. Could be. I don't know.
Well, that doesn't really look like HDMI sparkle.
I mean, it's really hard to see in this.
It is.
Anyways.
I mean, yeah, it's. And the description that he gave on Twitter, it was tough to tell. I mean, he asked if that's hot spotting, and that is not hot spotting. Hot spotting is when you have some positive gain on your screen higher than a 1.0 gain, which means that the screen itself is not perfectly uniform in the way that it reflects light. It reflects more light back towards the middle of where the light came from versus dispersing it completely evenly like a 1.0 gain screen.
Right.
And when you do that, if you're sitting a little off to the side or your projector is mounted not right in the middle, you'll find that like one side of the screen is brighter than the other, or the middle of the screen is brighter than the edges. Right. That's what we would call.
If you've ever seen one of those like rear projection DLPs, the old ones,
right?
You know, that's exactly what they look like when you get close to them. The center is brighter.
That's what we would call.
There's more to this. He says the sparkles don't move and they're all over the entire screen. If he gets right up close, they seem to be coming from the reflective nature of the screen itself. Is there anything to do outside of replacing the screen to get rid of this effect?
So I mean, this is the same screen material that you have, Tom, and so I mean, when I'm
wondering if he's sitting too close.
Well, it's just that I mean, so the Silverticket's matte white screen material is not completely textureless. It's not absolutely textureless and smooth, is it? I mean, you've seen it yourself in person.
It's right there.
Yeah, I mean it's got a tiny bit of texture to it, but not very much. They rate it at 1.1 gain, which means maybe it does have a small amount of a coating to it. You know,
I've never noticed what he's seeing here.
That's what I wanted to ask. Although, I mean, so I mean, you've got an Epson. You've got what, the 50-30 or 60-30? 60-20 or something like that. I mean, close to what he used to have. Yeah. So it is. I mean, honestly, I'm a little bit stumped on this one. This isn't what I would expect with this screen material because it's very close to being smooth and very close to being just 1.0. I asked about, is it dust or anything like that, but he's like, no, the sparkles don't move. His room isn't dusty, so it's not.
My room's dusty.
It's not that's going on. I mean, it can be the case that, I mean, he's gone to this genuine 4K with his previous projector where it was, I don't even know if the one he had was Wobble K. It might have just been pure 1080. But the Epsons before, similar to the Panasonics that were 1080, I mean, they actually had a little bit of intentional blurring between each pixel so that you wouldn't see any screen door effect. Whereas on these JVCs, like if you get the focus razor sharp, like if you get right up there, you can see each individual. I'm like, I wonder if a tiny bit of defocusing would actually, not to the point that you notice it, but might actually, if that could potentially be responsible. What you said there about HDMI sparkle, but usually that moves. It doesn't stay static.
Yeah.
It moves if it's HDMI sparkle.
But this is not unlike what I've seen with HDMI sparkle. Yeah, but this is a static image, of course, so I don't know.
Yeah. But he says the sparkles don't move.
But you're right, it does. That would move.
It does. It shimmers.
So he says he's noticing this.
He puts up an all-white screen or like what he's showing here where it's like a menu where it's mostly gray and white.
Well, I mean, are you putting your nose on it to see this, or are you seeing it from your seat?
Oh, he noticed it from his...
would be my question.
Yeah, he noticed it from his seat first and then, got up close to try and see exactly what was going on. I mean, it wouldn't be. There is a term called speckle, not sparkle, but speckle is almost. I mean, it's pretty much only from laser light sources, where because it's laser light, when it hits the screen, it doesn't actually like scatter completely evenly. It almost like splashes on the screen in a weird way, and you get some little areas that are brighter than others. They call that speckle with a laser light projector, and they actually physically vibrate the screen like in a Dolby Cinema that uses laser light projection. They physically vibrate the screen to even out that speckle. It's not the case with an NX7. NX7 is lamp based, so honestly, a little bit stumped on this. Going through it with him on Twitter, the only thing I could think of was to maybe just try to defocus a tiny little bit. It might just be that the pixels are so small and so sharp that the tiny amount of texture that is on Silver Ticket's screen might be just enough to give you this sparkle effect. It's the only thing I could think of. If anyone else has other information, please let us know.
Yeah, I would like to hear that too. Rob, not this Rob, a different Rob. Rob bought a Dayton SA-1000 Class AB 1000 watt subwoofer amplifier to power his pair of butt kicker advanced tactile transducers. The manual says you can select how it powers on all the time, unless you physically press the main power switch. Auto sensing, which should go into standby after 15 minutes of no detected signal, and automatically go to full power when it detects a signal on the RCA inputs. Okay, this is very confusing for me.
Sorry.
Here. I'm trying to get this. So there's on all the time, auto sensing,
or the 12 volt
and 12 volt trigger. Okay, the rest of it. So what is on all the time? If you can't figure it out, I'm sorry, this podcast is not for you. Auto sensing, if it senses a signal coming in some way, it will turn itself on after a certain amount of time. It turns itself
15
into
minutes,
standby mode.
Supposedly.
Yeah. And 12 volt, which means once you power on your receiver, a 12 volt or some other device, you can use any device. There's a number of devices you might use, but usually it's a receiver. It sends a 12 volt signal to the amplifier. It says, hey, I'm on, you be on.
Right.
And it turns it on that way. Okay. So the manual mentions drawing 24 watts when connected to a 120 volt line as the standby power rating, but it also talks about going to sleep after 15 minutes and then waking up into ready mode. Rob has a meter that lets him see his current draw at an electrical outlet for his SVS sub and the Denon X4400H receiver. They're each drawing less than 1 watt when they're in standby. Powered on and idle, the SVS draws 11 watts and the Denon draws about 90. But this Dayton amp never draws less than 15 watts. From what he read in the manual, he was expecting it to draw 24 watts when idle, but it seems as though it's basically a constant 15 watt draw no matter what, and he's actually, no matter what, until he's actually playing something. If there is this 15-minute sleep mode, shouldn't that draw a lot less power, like under 1 watt, the way his SVS and Denon do? That's his question. He contacted Dayton's customer service. They were good and went through a lot of troubleshooting with them. They even offered a completely free exchange, including shipping both ways, but they really only seem to be reading from the manual. So do we know anything further about this? In the actual experience, is this constant 15 watt draw even when it should be a sleep normal, or should he try that free exchange? I don't think you're going to get any difference here. I think that's just what it is. That's the way it works.
Well, more than that, I mean, so I am only reading from the manual. I don't have personal experience with this exact model of amplifier, but what it says is standby power draw 24 watts. He's actually measuring 15, but I'm sure there's some give or take in how accurate the meter is and the way that they rated it. But like, that is the sleep. Standby is the sleep. Those are one and the same. There's no separate difference between sleep mode and standby mode. That's what it is. And they're telling you, yeah, this thing's going to draw 24 watts when it's in standby. So I think you're just seeing exactly what it is. It doesn't have a low, 0.1, 0.6 watt standby mode like a lot of other devices do. That wasn't always the case. Going back many years, lots of devices, they used to call it vampire power, right? There was the whole power saving initiative to try and get standby power a lot lower than it used to be. This is kind of an old school device that doesn't have that super low power draw.
It's a lower priced amplifier,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I mean this is like one of the trade-offs you're going to get is there's going to be features that you expect there to be there that seem to be on everything, and they're not here. Why aren't they here? Because they're trying to cut as many corners.
I mean, part of it is, this thing has no digital circuitry whatsoever. It's a completely analog device through and through. And that is one of those, the SVS subs, one of the reasons they can draw so little power is they have that little DSP chip with its non-volatile memory that can sit there without any power for a while. And then when you need the power, it can turn on. Same with your Denon receiver. It's got a lot of digital circuitry. So I really think that's all it is. I mean, hey, if they're offering you completely free exchange, free shipping both ways, if you want to take them up on it, it's not going to hurt Dayton. They'll be fine. But I really don't expect you to get a lower power draw. This was the way all devices used to be. So I think it's just old school.
You're expecting something else.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't
We've
think that's
gotten
the way
used to
this
it.
particular device works. Yeah. He asks, if you use the pre-out connections on, say, a Denon X4400H, what happens to the internal amplifiers of those channels? Do they remain powered on? There's nothing in the settings to manually tell his receiver that you're using pre-outs for specific channels. So if you're using all external amplification, the receiver is just acting as a pre-pro. Isn't it less than ideal for it to still be powering its internal amplifiers too? Well, I mean, what it does is it fills up. There's a transformer in there that fills up capacitors, and those capacitors are waiting for a power draw. Mm-hmm. Remember, there's not 100 watts behind a floodgate at each channel waiting to come out. That's just being cycled, turned into heat and then cycled and turned into heat and cycled. That's not what's happening. They have these capacitors that are there, and it's waiting for you to pull the signal that you're sending to the speaker to say, oh, do this, and the speaker says, I need this much power to do this, and then zoop, there it goes, and it refills those, then it takes those capacitors. They are always powered on. There's always power. Could you save more power by? Yeah, I'm sure you could.
A little bit.
I don't know how much. I mean, I don't think it would be a significant amount because you're not actually using any of it. It's just sitting there, waiting to be
I mean,
used.
there were some Denon flagship receivers at some points where it did give you the option to say just go into pre-pro mode, just completely bypass the internal amplifiers altogether and just act as a pre-pro. But that is very unusual, and the Denon X4400H doesn't have anything like that. But yeah, those amplifier channels are just sitting there, idle, ready. If you did connect speaker wire to it, sound could still come out of a speaker. They're not completely turned off, but at the same time, they're not pushing any power through those binding posts. They're just kind of sitting there waiting with nothing to do, and it's
you can make the same. You can make the same argument the other way too, because the pre-outs are always powered as well. Right. I mean, it's not as much power as you would put into an amplifier channel, but there's always
always a signal going to them. Yep.
Yeah, there's power going to those things as well. So should we be able to turn those off too? Sure, but if you said, "Hey Tom, I'll give you the ability to turn off all these different things, and you'll be able to save a couple of watts a day or something," but your receiver's going to cost an extra $200, and be like, nah, I'm good.
I mean, what you certainly could do, if it helps at all, and you've got the measurement device to see whether it does help at all or not, there'd be no problem putting your Denon X4400H into eco mode if you're not using any of the internal power amplifiers, because if that puts them in an even lower power state, even at idle, then maybe it saves a few watts, and there'd be no trouble doing that because you're not actually sending any power through your speaker binding posts.
So the features across, say, Denon's AV receivers and Marantz's dedicated pre-pros appear to be basically identical, but the receivers are cheaper. Why is that? Because it's an economy of scale. Yeah. You can make a lot more receivers because you can sell a lot more receivers. Mm-hmm. Therefore, you can make those receivers for cheaper, and the pre-pros don't sell as well. So you can't make as many. Well, you don't need as many of them, so you don't make as many of them. So they cost more to make. Yep. Per unit.
It's pure economy of scale. That's all it is. I mean, the internals, the electronics inside, other than amplifiers, obviously, are shared. So, it's purely about how many of each of them they make. And that's about it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Ken would like to upgrade his 5.1 computer speakers. All of his speakers are within 6 feet, but it seems as though dedicated PC speakers all sound pretty unimpressive, which is...
I'd have to more or less agree with, for the most part.
There's a couple out there that aren't too bad, but yeah, you're definitely making compromises because you assume.
Well, especially when you're getting
the
the 5.1 packs, where
yeah.
usually the way those work is everything is connected to the quote-unquote subwoofer, which we would call a base module, and then the base module feeds the 5 or 7 speakers itself. That's almost always how PC speakers, ones that are like labeled PC speakers, seem to be connected. And yeah, a lot of them are unimpressive. So I'm mostly in agreement with you there, Ken.
So he'd like a compact 5.1 speaker package for $400 or less. It's not impossible. But he's also trying to figure out how to power them. He has a Sound Blaster Z sound card. So does he need to connect an AV receiver, or could he just plug the outputs of his sound card directly into an amplifier? The smaller the better, and everything needs to fit on his desk. So he was hoping to avoid a full-size AV receiver. He heard his friend's DefTech Pro Cinema 400 speaker system and thought it sounded pretty good. So should he go with those, or is there a better 5.1 speaker package within his budget? So, I'm sure Rob has a laundry list of things to tell you.
I got a few things.
So, I will tell you that what I would immediately do is, first of all, I don't know about the Sound Blaster card, so I'm going to ask Rob first. What's that deal?
So, I mean, what you've got there is basically, it does 5.1 decoding, and so it has 3.5 millimeter stereo analog output jacks. So you could front, left, right, surround, left, right, and then it splits the center and subwoofer to the third stereo 3.5. So you can use so what's coming out of there is analog. You could use stereo 3.5 millimeter to RCA adapter cables. Those are cheap and easy. Grab them at Monoprice or on Amazon or whatever. And you could plug those directly into a 5-channel amplifier and connect your speakers directly to those. And then the subwoofer would be self-powered, and it would take the other lead from one of those breakout cables. You could do that, but the issue is, where do you find a 5-channel amplifier that is smaller than an AV receiver, significantly so, and this affordable?
Fits within the $400 budget and can power a subwoofer as well.
Well, it doesn't have to power the subwoofer. You could be getting a powered sub, but I mean that's the issue there. What you're proposing in theory is totally correct. You could just analog out to a 5-channel amplifier.
This actually kind of goes back to our last question of economy of scale. What you want is would be such a niche product that it'd be all. It's like, this is for people who want to have want to connect their computer or some sort of analog device, and they want the amplifier to be small and on their desk, and they want all these other things.
I suppose what you could do is get 3 little stereo Class D amplifiers.
Right.
But each one of those has its own wall wart to plug in, and you'd have a little stack of them. That's okay. It's smaller than an AV receiver, no question about that. But it's kind of, and each of those costs like $60-$70 at least. Some of them are upwards of $100. So again, the cost of it all ends up being a little bit of an issue.
So as far as the amplifier is concerned, I have a hard time. Your really 2 options are, to me, self-powered speakers, which would be something along the lines of like Audio Engine. Those are computer speakers. We've already,
although that would 5 of those would break the budget. It very
break the budget quickly. Already, right? Yeah. And no subwoofer.
And no subwoofer yet. Yeah, that's right. Separate sub to get.
I would go to accessories for less and start looking at self-powered speakers and satellite speakers, and with the entry level, like the Marantz slim lines or some sort of small receiver.
Right. Slim lines
I don't really see
are
how
not
you're getting away
super
from a
cheap.
receiver.
So
no, they're not.
like an X1500H, a Denon X1500H. It's an AV receiver. It's not, if you look at especially the depth front to back, it is actually smaller than a lot of other AV receivers, the X1500H, but it's $280. That's taking up a lot of your budget. It is an AV receiver as far as side to side width and height. It's the size of an AV receiver. I think he wants smaller than that. Value wise, it's certainly right there. So what I'm going to suggest to you, because this is a 5-channel amplifier, 100 watts total, so it's only 20 watts per channel, but for for speakers that are only going to be 6 feet away from you, that's fine. So it's Pyle, Pyle, that brand. They sell this cool, very small little 5-channel amplifier. It's almost exactly what you're wanting. The thing is, it doesn't have 5 analog inputs to use with your particular Sound Blaster sound card. What it has is an HDMI input. Now, the thing is, your computer, I don't know if he's got a separate graphics card. I don't know what connection you're using to your monitor. But computers these days, you pretty much always have an HDMI output on your motherboard. And then if you do have a separate graphics card, well, you can tell your computer to output the sound via the motherboard's HDMI output. And that can be your audio output device. It could feed this little Pyle 5-channel amplifier. We'll have the link for it. It's just on Amazon. It's $1 under $100. So that certainly doesn't break the budget. It's the size that you want, and it'll do what you want to do. It even has a subwoofer output, so it'll do a little bit of basic bass management for you as well. And you can feed the subwoofer off of this Pyle amplifier. So it checks all the boxes. As long as you can do audio out via HDMI, that's good. So then, what speakers do you connect it to? I mean, normally I would have gone for the Energy Take 5s back in the day.
Right, those are
discontinued, but Monoprice basically made clones of them. So Monoprice has their 10565 5.1 speaker package, which is essentially a clone of the Energy Take 5 Classics. It's only $150. So we've got you down to $250 for what I consider an entirely capable system like that. Monoprice does have their HT35 quote-unquote premium 5.1 speakers, which are, again, basically clones of the Energy Take Classics, just with slightly nicer looking cabinets than the 10565. Those go for $220. So if you want the slightly nicer looking cabinets and the same sound quality as the Energy Take 5 Classics, there you go. $320 gets you there. We've hit your budget. We've done what you want to do. If that little Pyle amplifier doesn't quite work out for you, again, like an X1500H could still get you there with those Monoprice speakers within the budget that you're looking for. That's where I would point you. Accessories for Less does have the Focal, Sib, and Cub 5.1 speaker package. They're bigger than you might think, and they're $400 all by themselves. So I don't know if the amplifier had to be included in that $400 price point. I really like those Focal, Sib, and Cub, and $400 for that package is a great discount.
These all include subwoofers?
These all include subs, these 5.1 packages. Okay. Powered subs.
I was scrolling through the next question and going, "Oh my God!" and then didn't listen to anything you said. It's up to F.
And the Jay wrote it himself, so you can't blame me. This is what's going on.
I know.
But that's coming up. So anyway, hopefully that helps you out there, Ken. I'd grab some of those Monoprice 5.1 speakers and that Pyle 5-channel amplifier.
Okay. I gotta go. So like Rob said, this is from Jay, and Jay wrote everything himself in the third person.
That's right.
So that I could just read it. He's
like, Rob, don't retype this. I'm like, okay, this is what happens, Tom. This is what happens.
So I don't understand why. First of all, I don't understand why I'm getting punished for this. It's not my fault.
Sometimes people complain about my re-editing of questions, including Tom saying I'm too wordy.
No, I don't complain about your re-editing. I do not. Only when I hit a word and go, what? And then it's, but everybody makes typos, so what's the big deal? All right, this is Jay. Jay listens to AVRant all the time and has learned so much from us that he's been happy to buy them cups of coffee by using the donation button on their website. He appreciates the time and effort put into producing this show, and respects the heck out of people who just want to help others get smarter and happier in any area of society. To recap, Jay had a 5.1 projection set up in an open area of his basement that could be heard throughout the entire house. Last year, he started to tear everything down to rebuild a sealed treated room with hat channels, clips, green glue, and double 5/8-inch drywall. The goal is or was 7.2.4. His equipment inventory right now includes golden ear. Every time I see golden ear, I see gold e near. That's what I see. They should have hyphenated. But anyways, golden ear, Triton 2 pluses, and Super Center references up front. MPXs on the sides and rear. HTR 7000 for the overhead Atmos channels. I guess those are all golden.
Those are all golden ear speakers.
Dual PB3000s which will be from SVS. Those are to be ordered, haven't been ordered yet. He has a Marantz SR7010, and 3 Outlaw 2200 mono blocks amplifiers powering the left, center, and right. Those are on order, not having arrived, but they are in the mail. The Outlaw 5000 powering sides and overheads is Sony VPLHW40ES, which is a projector.
1080p.
He's awaiting for that Epson 5050 to go on sale. That's before he buys that, which will be his thing. Anyways, he's had some setbacks, but recent progress has the ceiling up, and he's about to board the walls. Here are his new questions. He will have more later. So if you're looking at YouTube, there's some pictures of some blank walls. Some of them have insulation in them, some of them do not, but you could see where
and where the door frame opened, that used to be just an open wall, so he's closed that in, framed around his HVAC ducting, and ready to close up this room. But questions before he does so.
Jay has previously mentioned that just for option's sake, he built and installed backer boxes for a second pair of side surrounds directly at the second row of seats. He thought he'd just cover them with drywall and leave them with a maybe one-day mentality. Unfortunately, now that they're there, he finds he just can't leave well enough alone and is indeed going to add a second row of side surrounds. Right. Question is how to wire this up properly. Last time he inquired about this, Tom read his question. Rob suggested simply wiring these in parallel with a pair aimed at the front row.
I don't believe I suggested wiring things in parallel. That doesn't sound like me.
Series.
But anyway.
Yeah. But Jay doesn't think this will do because in the perfect world ruled by a very picky man, he would like to be able to turn on or off each pair of side surrounds. Perhaps he will sit in the front row and not feel the need for the second row of surrounds, or perhaps for some movies he wants to sit in the second row and turn off the front row of surrounds. Jay just wants the control, that controller, because Jay's like that. He's very close to finishing the private theater he's wanted since he was a boy, and he doesn't want to cut any corners on audio. That doesn't mean he has oodles of money, just a middle-class guy that saved up to build his dream room. How does he set this up properly and ensure that the speakers will have adequate power to them? Okay, so first of all, we already said you suggested series, not parallel.
I would have suggested series,
parallel.
Absolutely. And you can do that even if you pre-wired everything back to one location, because all you do is red to red of the first speaker, black to black of the second speaker, and then red to black of speaker 1 to speaker 2. Even if that's all the way back at your AV receiver or your amplifier, totally fine to do that. It makes one chain from red through speaker 1 into speaker 2 and back to the amplifier out of the black speaker 2. That would be the normal.
I understand what he's saying here and why he wants to do this. It all makes perfect sense. I will say that in my mind, in order for this to work properly, you would need to not only have the ability to turn the different speakers on and off as you wish, but you would also need 3 different calibration files for your Odyssey, because you will be getting different
different output levels, different EQ.
That's right. So you're now having to, I've decided to sit in the back row. I've got to reload a new Odyssey file up because that's when it's just the back row.
Yeah.
For me, this is money that you don't need to spend. Hassle that you're not going to want to go through in the long run. In the long run, you'll be like, I'm changing seats. Do I really want to
over time, this is something you will quickly stop doing. You might do it once or twice because you're like, I did it. This is what I had in mind. And over time, you'll be like, this isn't worth the hassle of reloading Odyssey. So we're just going to leave it in one speaker configuration, which will be both speakers on both sides playing at the same time, wire them in series. I'll just tell you, if you're like, come hell or high water, this is what I want to do. All you really need is a speaker A-B selector switch, one for each side, including the type where you can power A-B at the same time. So Monoprice has this. It's basically for a whole house audio where one pair of inputs can go to as many as 4 speakers or 4 channels, but four pairs of speakers. But you can totally do this. It will automatically align things so that the impedance isn't something that's going to blow up your amplifier. It costs $90, so you can do that. Speaker A/B selector switch for whole house audio from Monoprice, but don't do it. Just wire them in series and play them both all at the same time.
Yeah, don't do it. Jay is also wondering about which universal remote to go with. He was initially thinking Harmony Elite, but came across someone who claimed Harmony was fading in the marketplace. Is there another brand we would recommend, or is Harmony still king of the hill? Who said they were fading?
I don't understand. Like, there's always these headlines that are like, finally you can get rid of your Harmony remote. Like, why is that always the approach? Like, No, just get a Harmony. It's what you want. It works really
Finally,
well.
you can get rid of the thing that makes your life easier.
I know. And none of the ones
for
that
something
have claimed
else
to do
that does
have ever been as good.
And instead use this other thing that is more complicated and doesn't work as well.
That's right. No, absolutely get a Harmony. If you want one that's the remote in your hand, has both a touch screen and hard buttons, absolutely get the Elite. Yes, it costs more, but you know what? You will use it every single darn day, and it's worth it. It's easily justifiable. If you want to separate, if you want a remote that only has hard buttons and everything that's touch screen you're willing to do on your smartphone, you could just get the Harmony Companion. It is like $200 cheaper. You load the app on your smartphone, and that becomes your touch screen. You can totally do things that way if you want to, but the Harmony is totally worth it, and get a Harmony.
My Harmony has been going for years, and I think some people have complained about battery life or whatever.
It's rechargeable.
It's not only is it rechargeable, but mine stays charged for quite some time. And if I always charge it during this podcast. Like that's my dedicated 2-hour charging window for the thing, and then it'll sit up there for the rest of the day until because we don't really use it until night, and then it'll sit out for a week until I finally put it back up there. But it'll die every once in a while.
Sure.
Like I'll kill it. I killed it last night. Last night it was dead. And what did I do? I grabbed my phone, controlled it with the phone,
there you go.
And for 10 minutes while it charged up enough for me to grab the remote again. It's really not that hard. I don't see any reason to go with. No one has convinced me that any of these other systems are any better. A lot of them can look and be very, very slick, but you need a custom installer to do everything, and it's all super duper expensive, and none of it's worth it as far as I'm concerned. So Jay is also wondering what percentage one should expect a dealer to deduct from a demo pair of towers. He was offered a new pair of Golden Ear reference towers at 12.8% off. 12.8 is very specific.
Yes.
MSRP. A couple of weeks later, the dealer called him back and offered to sell him the demo pair at 30%. They are still expensive. He just wants to know if he should counter offer or just whip out the card.
I don't know why you need new speakers. You've got completely adequate speakers. I mean, unless you're, it'd be Golden Ear to Golden Ear. This doesn't make any sense, Jay. Don't buy these. And I would expect a demo pair to be 50% off, to be honest. That's what I'm expecting.
50%. Okay, so how much markup is there at these things? And it's not really markup; it's built in. The dealer cost. They when they ship them to them, they're like, these are $100 pair of speakers. Give us $50. 50 points on a pair of speakers is pretty common, I think, and it could be much higher. Depending on the brand and everything else. So, that being said. There's little motivation for them to knock the price down anymore if they've got somebody who's willing to take it at 30% off.
Right.
So of course they're going to say 30%. And you could counter offer. They could say, well, I'll just hold on to them, wait till somebody will take them for 30% because this is a popular pair of speakers, and you'll lose out, and that would be okay. But
you don't need this pair of speakers, Jay. You've already got Triton 2 Plus towers. You're done as far as speaker buying goes.
Yeah. So he can't get a straight answer about building a riser. Well, he must not have asked us. He has his height and all that, but he doesn't plan to use sand to fill it, but rather, and he doesn't plan to use sand to fill it, but rather just insulate it well. Okay, all right, whatever. He's trying to find out what surface the riser should be built on. Right now, it's concrete. The plan is for the dimpled plastic DMX layer on the concrete, then OSB tongue and groove under padding and a nice dense carpet. Should the riser be built on the concrete, the OSB, or the carpet? Can I just say carpet and skip reading the rest of this? But whatever. He's inquired on AVS forum and searched other forums, and he winds up going down rabbit holes of information where people comment, but no definitive answer is really offered. No. We should consider that Jay plans to be in his home for another 5 to 10 years. The first priority is sound and satisfaction, but another factor is what would be easy to market for resale. It would be nice to say riser is somewhat easily removed if possible. What would we recommend he do here? I would build it on the carpet. I mean, I would.
I mean, it'll crush the carpet. It'll leave things in the carpet there, but I mean, I'm either you finish the entire floor and you build the riser on top of the finished floor, on top of the carpet, or if this is semi-built-in but theoretically removable, I would put it on top of the so before the carpet goes in, whatever that is, right? that's where you build the riser on top of that. One or the other. Either it's on top of the carpet or it's as if you had removed the carpet and whatever is directly below the carpet, that's where you build your riser. One of those two things. It absolutely does not get built directly onto the concrete. There's no way, no how I would ever do that with a riser. So it's one of those two options. If you're like, I don't want to crush the carpet underneath because I am planning to remove this later, well then just only carpet up to where the riser goes and then build the riser there. One or the other.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you build it on top of the concrete, you have to worry about
just don't
vibrations
do it. Don't even consider that.
Yeah. So build it on top of the finished floor, and then I guess you could connect it to the finished floor, and then have them carpet the whole thing.
You could.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh yeah, just cut the carpet off, and you have a big hole in your carpet now. I would rather say there is carpet underneath there. I'm not sure what condition it's in, but there is carpet underneath there, and all you have to do is take the couch off and pick this box up, and it goes out. That's what I would want to say. Yeah. So Jay is looking at the Epson 5050. That is really topping out at his price range for a projector to replace his Sony, but the step up from the 5040 is just in frame rate for gaming, makes him wants it, whatever. He also heard that Epson is great for customer service and warranty issues. Any other recommendations he should look at, or is Epson just the king in that price range for faux K picture? Yeah. I mean, that's all we recommend. So yes. Right now,
that's it.
As of February 18th, 2020, that's the projector we're recommending. Tomorrow might be different. But today,
there's a step up to the JVCs. There's a step down to the 1080p panels that get wobbled 4 times in the DLP $1,500 range, or like Epson's own 3800, right at that $1,500 price point. You don't get any of the motorized zoom and all that, and you take a big hit in your black levels. So right there in the lovely middle, right at about $2,700 right now, is the Epson 5050 UB, and that's the king at that middle road.
He also said the walls are about to be boarded. Right after the ceiling was boarded, he listened to an episode where Rob suggested that someone run power from the projector outlet to a male inlet located by the equipment rack with a battery backup, to which Jay admitted a loud and disappointing sigh of, oh, too late. Well, now the walls are about to be boarded, and he doesn't want to wind up saying that again if he can help it. So he is asking if there's any common "I wish I would have done" statements we've heard that we can recommend he do at this stage. Anything else we can think of that he might want to do before the walls are up? It's okay for Tom to say, no, next question. But though all wires are run for 7.2.4, along with coax sub cables running to the left, left, center, right powered towers.
Yeah, don't use those. Just use speaker wire to your powered towers, please.
Yeah, you don't need that. Yeah. And 2 other dedicated spots. Well, I would put at least 4 other dedicated spots, the 4 corners, and then midpoints of the side walls. So that's 6, but whatever. Cat 6 is run from the router upstairs to the rack. So he's already run the speaker wire. He's already run the subwoofer wire. He can't run for the projector
anymore.
Anymore.
I mean, I would have told you, again,
conduit.
Don't too late. I would have said run everything in conduit so that if you need to replace anything, it's easy to pull the wire through, but too late for all of that. Conduit, especially for your HDMI cable to your projector, if you had had the opportunity to do so, because that very well might get replaced. Who knows? 48 gigabits per second. If that's, well, there's no way you ran a 48 gigabit per second ultra high speed premium HDMI cable, because they don't exist yet. So to replace that, I would have wanted conduit. But let's see. Yeah, maybe run a couple more. Well, you didn't need to run the coax RCA lines to your front speakers, because don't use those. I know you got powered woofers in your gold in your speakers, but don't use them. Just use speaker wire.
Push those wires back in the wall.
Yeah. Go over them.
Don't even let the temptation be there.
Yeah, I mean, your subwoofers are either going to go in corners or at the midpoints of walls if at all possible. So I guess wire for those. Anything else? Electrical? I mean, put putty around your electrical boxes before the walls go up. Put that putty around there because you're doing soundproofing. I think that's it.
Yeah. We'll think of something after you finish your walls. Send us a picture. We'll say, how come you didn't do this? Right. We would have said that. Joe Joe got a Sony A9G OLED, and it's connected to his Marantz SR7012 and an Apple TV 4K, his Panasonic UB9000 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and his cable box. He's discovered that even when he was swapping one Sony OLED, which had a panel problem, for another, the Apple TV 4K seemed to reset all of its picture settings, which resulted in Dolby Vision not working at first, and the frame rate switching wasn't working either. Why did this happen? And our Rob suggested Apple TV 4K settings with it set to 4K SDR, not 4K HDR, with YCBCR 420 color and match frame rate and range, both turned on, still applicable to an OLED, or were these only for projectors?
So that last one first, yes, that is applied to all 4K HDR displays. You want the default of your Apple TV 4K to actually be 4K SDR, which is not intuitive, but that means that everything that should be in SDR is SDR, and when you turn match range on, that kicks it into HDR mode when it is HDR and back to SDR mode when it's SDR. So those are the correct settings there. YCBCR, not RGB, 420 color, because that's what the content actually is. Those are all good. That applies to projectors and OLEDs and flat panels and everything. Now, why did the Apple TV reset itself? Well, because the Apple TV...
It's Apple.
Every time you unplug it and plug it into a display, it doesn't remember EDID settings. It's as though you had plugged it into a TV for the first time ever in its life, and it starts all over again. That
wouldn't have been my guess, but that's just about as dumb as what my guess would have been. Yeah.
That's all it is. It goes right. It's like, oh,
I'm sorry,
this is the first time I've ever been plugged into a TV.
It's like the Dory of devices. You unplug it and it forgets where it is.
Yep.
Like I thought maybe it remembered settings, based on the issue of my handshake. So if you plugged it into a new TV, it's like, oh, this is a new TV. You guys start all over again. Which would be that sounds like Apple to me. That sounds just as dumb as Apple can be. But not putting a memory chip in there someplace to remember the settings is significantly stupider.
Sometimes I take my Apple TV 4K over to my parents' place to watch something, that their LG OLED doesn't have the streaming service built right into its smart TV platform. Take it over there. It's like, I have to do all the setup. When I bring it back home to my display, got to do all the setup all over again. It just doesn't remember.
That's why Rob has this stuff on the tip of his tongue. Right there. So should he use Dolby Vision Bright or Dolby Vision Dark picture mode on his Sony?
Well, how dark is your room? Dolby Vision Dark is the technically correct. That is the EOTF, the electro-optical transfer function. It follows exactly the code values that say this code value means exactly this many nits, and Dolby Vision Dark is the one that is completely accurate to that. But it was intended for a completely dark room. If you have like any light in your room, even just a normal lamp on, that's actually brighter than the room was supposed to be for Dolby Vision Dark. And if you're like, this looks too dark, I can't see shadow detail, go ahead and use Dolby Vision Bright. That's what it's there for.
So he tried Rob's suggestion of using auto listening mode on his Marantz, which is accessed by pressing the pure listening mode button on the remote 3 times. For Atmos and DTS, it works perfectly, but for regular 5.1 content, like from his cable box, for example, it goes into Dolby Surround listening mode, and 5.1 DTS discs go to DTS Neural X, which sounds like it's still working perfectly, but let's go on. Excuse me. Direct listening mode plays these in 5.1 without any upmixing, which is what he wants, but auto always seems to apply an upmixer. Can this be changed, or was some sort of mistake made? Or is direct the only way to get what he wants?
Well,
yeah.
So I mean,
it's not a mistake.
It's not a mistake. That is pretty much what it does in the auto. If it doesn't seem to be every single model. It seems to be a little bit model specific. My SR7010 does exactly what you're describing. When
mine does too. Was it 4,000?
Yeah, you got a 4400 HX4400. So the auto does when it's like actual Atmos or actual DTS:X, that's exactly what it does. But when it's 5.1 Dolby Digital 5.1 from your cable box, it automatically engages the Dolby Surround up mixer. For DTS 5.1, it automatically engages the DTS Neural X up mixer. That is typical. Now, he wants 5.1 to come out as 5.1. He wants stereo to come out as stereo. He wants Atmos to come out as Atmos. Direct does that, but it also turns off your bass management, and it also turns off your Odyssey. It's not only pure direct that does that. Regular direct does that. So you're not really getting what you want there. The solution for you unfortunately, is a little bit of a hassle, which is you are simply, Joe, going to have to select the listening mode you want every time it comes up, and your Marantz will remember that. It'll remember when this type of signal comes in, this is the listening mode that was used last time on this type of signal, and it will go back to that. So you're kind of going to have to do it once, and it is input dependent. So for each of your HDMI inputs, every time a new sound format comes out and it's not the listening mode you want, you'll have to set it manually to the listening mode that you want. But then the next time that type of signal comes on that input, it does remember, and it goes back to what you used last time. So after a little while, it will act the way you want it to act.
All right, so I just got a 911 phone message from somebody, so I am going to go.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to keep the podcast going.
I will keep going.
You can keep going, but I am going to sign out and say goodbye to everybody. And
any
have
chance you'll be back or no?
Zero chance.
Zero chance.
Yes.
All right.
Zero chance.
Well, I'm signing over to just me on this video feed then, and I will keep carrying on. And I hope everything goes okay, Tom.
It'll be fine, I'm sure. All right. Thank you.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Have a good week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Alrighty, well, a little bit unusual, but yes, it'll be a solo podcast for about the next hour or so. Let's see what happens. Okay, we're still with Joe here, and he said he tried playing the Ultra HD Blu-ray of Ready Player One, which has a Dolby Atmos logo on the back of the box, but when he used that auto listening mode, his Marantz said that it was using DTS Neural X on its front panel. Why would that be the case, and was it still playing the overhead sounds correctly? Okay. Honestly, I know this might be a little bit pedantic. I hope this doesn't come across as insulting in any way, but I think you were playing the Blu-ray, not the Ultra HD Blu-ray. The Blu-ray is in the same package, and very often, for some strange reason, they actually put the Blu-ray in the main disc slot, and the Ultra HD Blu-ray is over on the left-hand side, usually hidden behind a piece of paper that has your digital redemption code printed on it. I think you were just playing the regular Blu-ray. There is no way that a disc that is in Dolby Atmos, and the Ultra HD Blu-ray of Ready Player One would ever play in a DTS listening mode by default. That just wouldn't happen. But the Blu-ray in that package is in DTS HD Master Audio. So I really think that's what happened here. It's with the auto listening mode. That's kind of the only explanation that I have. And of course, it isn't an actual DTS X soundtrack on the regular Blu-ray. So there are no overhead sounds that were manually mixed by the studio. Instead, it was creating those. It was matrixing those using the up mixer. So pretty sure that's what's going on there. Moving on, we're on Carlton B. We've talked about how the NVIDIA Shield is the best hardware option for running Plex. And one of the main reasons is because as a Plex playback device, the NVIDIA Shield is able to output the full audio bit streams, including lossless Dolby True HD and Atmos, and lossless DTS HD Master Audio and DTS X. Over on the Apple TV 4K, the native Plex app for that device only does lossy audio. If you want lossless audio, there's been a go-to solution, which has been to use the Infuse app available on the Apple TV 4K. It will decode Dolby True HD and DTS HD Master Audio into multi-channel PCM inside the Apple TV 4K. But then, of course, it still means no lossy Atmos or DTS X because it's not a bit stream. It's a decoded multi-channel PCM audio at that point. So the folks over who make the Infuse app, they just announced the addition of Dolby Atmos support for the Infuse app. And that got Carlton all excited when he saw that headline. But his excitement quickly faded when he saw that it's only for EAC3, which is the technical name for Dolby Digital Plus. That's the lossy version. That's what you'll find on streaming services like Netflix that offer Atmos audio. So this Infuse app now supports Dolby Atmos output, but only from Dolby Digital Plus lossy versions of Atmos. So there's no way to convert lossless Dolby True HD from, say, a backed up Blu-ray disc in your Plex library into Dolby Digital Plus lossy version of Atmos. So Carlton wants to know, why did they even bother to add this feature? Is it just like a marketing gimmick to say, hey, we have Atmos output now, but it's only for the lossy version? Well, I'm going to say that a lot of people who are using Plex for a local library of stored content are not backing up their physical Blu-ray and Ultra HD Blu-ray discs and getting the lossless soundtracks. I think they're using BitTorrent and they're downloading ripped versions that came from the streaming services or from, say, iTunes or from the Google Play Store or something like that, from Vudu. Those will have lossy Dolby Digital Plus based Atmos, and a lot of people, that's what they've downloaded. That's what's in their Plex library. And those will now play out of the Infuse app with Dolby Digital Plus Atmos. So that is absolutely my guess there, Carlton. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on with that. Still no way on the Apple TV 4K to get full lossless Atmos or DTS:X bit streams coming out from backed up Blu-rays within Plex. Okay, RD. RD bought his house a couple of years ago. It came with some NXG in-wall speakers. Those were installed throughout the house, and he's using those along with several Sonos amps and whole house music setups. Basically all based off of Sonos, and then maybe using like the Sonos Connect to connect to speakers that were already installed, or the Sonos amps to power these NXG speakers that were pre-installed. But in his theater area, he's been using the NXG NX520W in-wall speakers that were pre-installed in the left, center, and right positions. They use a 5.25-inch aluminum-coated poly woofer along with a 1/2-inch titanium tweeter. RD thinks they don't sound terrible, his word, but he's considering an upgrade on those. So his theater area is in an alcove. It's within a huge 2-story open concept space, so definitely not an enclosed rectangle. He's got a 65-inch Vizio P-Series TV and a Denon X3600H. He's powering a 5.2.4 Atmos configuration. Bass is being handled by 2 infinite baffle subwoofers. Each of those has dual 16-inch drivers. He's got 4 16-inch drivers in infinite baffle installation in total. Bass is not a problem in his setup, even with his wide open concept space. His surrounds and his overheads are Orb audio speakers, so those are not in-walls, I would guess. Those are those very spherical Orb audio speakers. He's just looking for front, left, center, and right to upgrade at the moment. He wants to stick with in-walls. He's got about $1,800 to spend for the 3 speakers, and he wants the installation to be as simple as possible. So he'd prefer if the new speakers are the same size or larger than his current NXG in-walls. That way he can just cut the existing drywall a little bit more, install the new speakers. He won't have to do drywall patching. So the current NXG speakers use a 10-inch by 6.5-inch cutout. After his own research, his front runners are either the Axiom M5 in-walls, those go for $550 each, so they'd fit his budget, or the Focal 300 IW6 speakers. They're listed at $800 each, but he says he can obtain them within his budget, so I'll take RD's word for it. Would either of those be a huge upgrade over his NXG front speakers? Would he be throwing money away? Or, of course, is there something much better that we would recommend instead of any of these? Okay, so those NXG speakers, I have not heard them in person, but just looking at their driver complement and looking at their power handling and efficiency and all that type of stuff, I would definitely say an upgrade is very possible over those speakers. Axiom, okay, we've sort of, poo-pooed Axiom a little bit in recent years because we don't think they represent the great value that they once did. However, their speakers still sound good. One thing I really like about their in-wall offerings is that they are fully sealed with back enclosures already on their in-wall speakers. You don't have to purchase separate back enclosures. There's no way to leave them open, just firing into the cavity of your wall. They fit the price range. These M5s have high power handling and good efficiency. I'm actually pretty impressed, and I'm not too upset about the price at $550 each, again, because they already have that back enclosure as part of the design. Would they be a big upgrade in sound quality? Hard for me to say without having heard the NXG speakers, but they will certainly be able to play louder without distortion. Like if you were turning up the volume on those NXG speakers and hearing some distortion, these will be able to definitely go louder. No question about that. Still using a titanium tweeter here, but it's a 1-inch titanium tweeter. It's a 3-way design with a dedicated mid-range driver and a dedicated bass driver built in, and the sealed design. I actually quite like those. I'm thinking that might be a pretty good choice. Now, those Focal 300 IW6s, that is without question a sound quality upgrade. I mean, these are pretty much an entirely different class of in-wall speaker compared to what you're dealing with here. I wouldn't expect any type of good timbre match to the rest of your systems. These are going to sound significantly different, but these are a really impressive design. If you can get them at that price range, if you can install them, there's pretty much no reason to go away from those Focal 300 in-walls. The only thing is backer boxes would be separate. And I really want in-wall and in-ceiling speakers to have back enclosures. So the other ones that we always go to, of course, from RBH. RBH does have back enclosures. They do have their signature series to hit your price point. In fact, it would still be going over your price point because they're up and about the 700, 750 each type of price range. Is the smallest of RBH's signature series. That is their SI 740. That's only a 2-way design, and the backer box that they're designed to work with is not a retrofit. So if you want to avoid patching drywall and stuff like that, can't really do it with those. The one that probably makes a little bit more sense in RBH's lineup is their VM616. I'm a big fan of the M series drivers from RBH. Really, really high quality drivers, but you are looking at about $800 to $900 each, depending on your dealer, for the VM616, and backer enclosures would be in addition to that. RBH does have their retrofit foam-based back enclosures. I'm a big fan of those, but it does mean that this price is getting close to about $3,000 for 3 of those VM616s, so we've gone well over your budget. PSB is another company where I like their in-wall offerings, again, because they're fully sealed. The back enclosure is already included. They have their WLCR. It's part of their Imagine series, which are really excellent speakers, but these go for about $900 each. So, all things considered, maybe a little bit surprisingly, but I actually think those Axiom M5s might be your best choice here. Timbre matching wise, I can't say for sure, but at least the tweeter is more similar to the speakers that you already have. But this would be an upgrade over those NXGs, no question. And I love that sealed enclosure design, and the price hits what you want to hit. If you can afford those Focals, I mean, they're in a different league. If you can install those are a different league. The only issue is the back enclosure is going to be extra, and it might make you want to upgrade everything else in your system, because that's a whole different ball game. But yeah, they would be worth it if you can afford those. Alrighty, you know what? I'm going to take a little pause and take a sip of my drink, because I don't have any opportunity not to speak now that it's a solo man podcast. Who knew? Bear with me while I take a sip of a drink to re-cleanse my palate here. Sorry. All right. Let's crack on to Daryl A. We previously talked about Daryl's setup. He was considering switching from his front Klipsch towers to some SVS Ultra bookshelf speakers. He wanted to keep his Klipsch in-wall and in-ceiling speakers. He was worried about the timbre match between switching to SVS front speakers with his Klipsch in-wall speakers. We said, consider some Klipsch bookshelf speakers. He's got this new entertainment cabinet up front. He's got his Klipsch center already in there. He's like, these towers are not in the optimal positions. He'd like to switch over to bookshelves. We're like, Klipsch makes some great reference premiere bookshelf speakers, so why not consider those as long as he's happy with his current Klipsch sound? Well, He says he's got no problem with his Klipsch sound quality. He's going with that advice. He's grabbing some Klipsch Reference Premier bookshelf speakers. They're on the way. And just to explain a little bit about his thinking, he installed some front height speakers. He went with SVS's Prime Elevations for those, and he was impressed with them. So that's where the idea of possibly switching to SVS Ultra front speakers came from. But the last thing that is bugging him in his setup is that his Klipsch in-wall surrounds are actually on his back wall. That's where they were installed, and the right side of his room is open to his kitchen and dining room. So there's no good option for in-wall side surround speakers, he's thinking. And yeah, so he isn't getting the full surround sound experience that he would really like with his surround speakers being embedded in his back wall. So he wants to ask if getting Klipsch's bipole surround speakers and mounting them on the back wall where his current in-walls are installed would improve his surround sound experience, or are there any other solutions for getting better surround sound in his setup? All right, so if we look at what's going on his side walls, he actually does have like a wall space to his left. He, of course, has his back wall where the in-walls are already installed. And then on his right, it is open to his kitchen and dining room, but there's like a partial wall there that is actually like beside where his couch is, where you could mount a speaker. Now, an in-wall isn't going to work there. I wouldn't imagine in this partial wall that he has going to his kitchen. I don't imagine an in-wall would be feasible there, but Klipsch has Reference Premier on-wall speakers. The RP140D is absolutely all you would need. They go for $230 each. You can grab them at Crutchfield or right on Amazon. I've used those myself, and I think they're great. I'm a pretty big fan of those. The form factor is perfect, and I can wholeheartedly recommend that you mount some Reference Premier Klipsch on-wall RP140D speakers, mount them on that partial side wall next to your kitchen, and mount them on your left wall on either side of your couch. You don't even have to remove your surround back speakers. You can make those in-walls that are already installed into surround back speakers now, and expand yourself to a full 7.2.4 Atmos system. I'm kind of in favor of that, to be honest. So I think that is a solution there. Okay, so Nick K. Nick has a dedicated home theater in his townhouse basement. He's using a Marantz SR6013 receiver. He's powering a 5.2.4 setup. He's got B&W Bowers & Wilkins speakers and dual JL audio subs. Congrats on those. Those are really nice. In the rest of his townhouse, he's using Sonos speakers and Sonos Connect amps, powering in-ceiling speakers for his whole house audio. And in order to incorporate his theater into his Sonos system, he got a Sonos Port. There was a device that used to be called the Sonos Connect, but now it's the Sonos Port. So that makes it easy to send audio from his Sonos system into his Marantz, and he can include his theater in his whole house audio when he does that. But now he would like to add a turntable to his setup. He'd like to install the turntable in his theater for dedicated listening, but he'd also like to be able to share whatever the turntable is playing throughout the rest of his house via his Sonos system. So the Sonos Port does have left-right analog RCA inputs. So he is asking, what is the best way to connect everything? He'd like the option to send whatever his Marantz is playing to the rest of his house via Sonos. So maybe he's going to use some of the built-in streaming sounds or something that's plugged into his Marantz. He'd like to be able to share that audio throughout his whole Sonos system. So is there a way to plug the turntable into his Marantz and then have the Marantz share the turntable's sound via his Sonos Port? Would he be able to share anything that the Marantz is playing this way, including built-in streaming or other sources plugged in? Or does he need to get an outboard turntable preamp, connect his turntable directly to the Sonos Port, and then basically input the turntable's audio into his Marantz via the Sonos Port? So on the back of your SR6013, there are a couple of RCA outputs labeled as Zone 2. There's also a dedicated phono input with a ground wire connection. So you don't need an external turntable preamp. You can connect your turntable directly to your Marantz SR6013, use that dedicated phono input and its ground wire connection, because that does have more gain than, say, the CD audio input right next to it. That is, it's meant for phono. It is only meant for a moving magnet. It won't work with a moving cartridge turntable. Most turntables are moving magnet, but just be sure that it's a moving magnet turntable that you're buying if you're going to connect it directly to the Marantz. But once you've done that, you can absolutely set the Zone 2 output of your Marantz, and just use those RCA Zone 2 plugs to connect to your Sonos port. And now, whatever source is plugged into your Marantz, or it's built-in streaming, or your phono, select any of those sources as your Zone 2 output, and they'll get output to your Sonos port via the Zone 2 connections of your Marantz. The one little thing to be aware of: for your phono input, not going to be a problem. For the streaming services built into your Marantz, not going to be a problem. But for surround sound sources that are plugged into your Marantz, the Zone 2 output on the SR6013, it is not going to automatically down mix surround sound sources and output them as a stereo signal via Zone 2. You will need to go into the source device itself, like if it's your cable box, say, or your Blu-ray player, and tell that source device to output stereo audio to your Marantz, and then it'll be able to feed that stereo audio out of Zone 2. But if you're mostly thinking about the built-in streaming services of the Marantz and this new turntable connected to the phone input, those are stereo sources anyway, and those will just come out of the Zone 2 pre-outs, feed into your Sonos port, and Bob's your uncle. You're all set there. Andy M. Andy has a Marantz AV receiver, but for dedicated 2-channel listening, he has decided he wants a separate stereo-only preamp, so he got an Emotiva USP1. Now, that Emotiva USP1 does have inputs on the back labeled HT inputs. It has inputs in that section that are labeled as main, left, and right, and sub. There is a dedicated HT bypass button on the front panel and on the remote for the Emotiva, and he has made sure to always press that HT bypass button whenever he wants to use his Marantz receiver. So the Marantz front, left, right pre-outs are connected to the HT inputs, the main, left, and right inputs on the back of this Emotiva USP1 2-channel pre-pro. And the Emotiva is connected to an external 2-channel amp. But when he tried to play anything from the Marantz, he gets no sound from his front, left, right speakers, including like any 2-channel sources, including just the built-in test tones. 2-channel sources that are plugged directly into his Emotiva work just fine. So the front, left, right amplifiers and his front, left, right speakers do work, but for some reason this home theater bypass doesn't seem to be working for him. His front, left, right speakers, he wants them to run full range from his for his 2-channel listening. So if you look at the back of the Emotiva, he plugged the external 2-channel amp for the front, left, right speakers into the outputs that are labeled as full range on the back of the Emotiva. There are other outputs on the back of the Emotiva. There's ones labeled low pass and high pass, low pass for the subwoofer and high pass for the left-right speakers. And there are knobs associated with those low pass and high pass outputs that provide analog bass management. So it's like a full range left-right signal coming in, but you can analog bass manage those to output some of that sound to the low pass filtered subwoofer output, and then filter off that bass and output it from the high pass filtered front, left, right outputs. So yeah, since he wants to use full range for his front, left, right speakers, he didn't want to use those high pass outputs. But what does he need to do to get sound from his Marantz to pass through the Emotiva USP1 as it's supposed to be able to do? Well, I checked through the manual, and it does mention that for those home theater inputs, those HT inputs on the back, they only output sound from those inputs via the outputs that are labeled as high pass. It actually says that in the manual. for the USP1, the Emotiva USP1. So using those full range left-right outputs on the back, that's your problem. The HT inputs will not output sound from those full range connections. So you've got a little bit of a conundrum because it doesn't look as though there's any way to take those high pass outputs. You can turn the knob for them all the way to the left, but that gets you down to 50 hertz. It means everything below 50 hertz is going to be filtered off from those outputs, and output from the low pass filtered subwoofer output beside them instead. And that doesn't seem to be what he wants to do. So really, the only solution, if that's what you're dead set on doing, is having full range, is you would have to take the front, left, right pre-outs of your Marantz and plug them into one of the normal stereo audio inputs on the back of the Emotiva. It has, a selection of 5 that you can use. It's CD, tuner, auxiliary 1, auxiliary 2, and input. You could use any of those. The only real thing you have to be aware of there is that now the volume selection, the volume control of the Emotiva will be in play. For the home theater input, the home theater bypass, the Emotiva's own volume dial doesn't interfere with that. That's why it's a true bypass. But for all of the other regular stereo inputs, of course, the volume of the Emotiva comes into play. So you would simply have to select a constant volume level that you're always going to set your Emotiva Pre-Pro to that volume level. You know that's what it's going to be set at. Plug your Marantz's left-right pre-outs into a normal set of stereo inputs, and then you'll be able to use the full range output of the Emotiva. Or you just live with things being filtered off at 50 hertz. I don't know if you have a subwoofer or not. You could connect your subwoofer to your Emotiva. Tell your Marantz, I don't have a subwoofer, or since it has a subwoofer input on its home theater bypass, you could still use that there, but you could just say, I don't have a subwoofer. Now your front, left, right speakers in your Marantz are going to be set to full range. You send their full range signal into your Emotiva, and you use its analog base management to derive your subwoofer signal. That's the other way that you could come at this. Christian S. Christian has a 130-inch wide, 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio screen. It's acoustically transparent. It's from Seymour AV. He sits 15 feet away, and he's been using a Sony VW600 projector for the past 6 years. And now, with HDR and 4K, he's feeling like it's time to upgrade. All right, I'm going to take a short little pause here because Tom just texted me. Let's see what he has to say. All right. Nope, he's not coming back. I thought he might be saying he's coming back, but it's all right. Tom won't be back. Sorry for the pause. What an awkward podcast we are this week. Anyway, back to Christian. So yeah, he's got his VW600. He's had it for 6 years. He's thinking it's time for HDR and 4K. He's drawn to the top of the line JVC NX9, which they market as like a pseudo 8K projector. It's genuine 4K resolution. They wobble the 4K panel twice per frame. So it's really not 8K resolution, but it's compatible with like 8K input, even though it doesn't have HDMI 2.1. It's all a little confusing on the resolution side, but there are other upgrades involved in the NX9, particularly the massive and very expensive lens on the front of that thing. And that's really where the value is over, say, the NX7 below it in the lineup. A lot less for the 8K stuff that they talk about, a lot more for the awesome lens on that projector. But anyway, one of his concerns that's holding him back is that his projector is only mounted 4 feet behind his head, and he is worried about fan noise. His Sony is really quiet. It's totally unobjectionable, but his understanding is that the JVC projectors are not as quiet as the Sonys. His room is totally light controlled, but zooming in the projector to fill his 2.35 to 1 screen from left to right creates what would be the equivalent of a 150-inch 16:9 screen. So he's dealing with a pretty large image. He's having to zoom in. Reviews say that the fan noise of the JVC projectors gets considerably louder if they're in high lamp mode, and since he has such a large screen and they automatically kick into high lamp mode for HDR, he's worried about the fan noise. So for Christian, if he was going to have to choose between HDR being nice and bright versus noticeably louder fan noise, he'd sacrifice the HDR for the quiet. So what do we think? What's our opinion? Are the JVC projectors loud enough compared to what he's used to with his Sony that he's likely going to be bothered by it? In low lamp mode, you're not going to be bothered. These genuine 4K JVC projectors are, if they're not every bit as quiet as the Sonys, they're barely any louder in low lamp mode. That I'm not concerned with at all. The NX9, if you actually use that wobble stuff to get the pseudo 8K, there's a little bit of noise associated with that, but you can just turn that off and run it as just a 4K projector. Again, you're getting that upgraded lens in the NX9, which is sort of mostly what you're paying for with that thing. It uses like the same lens structure as their flagship laser projector, so that's mostly what it's about. But they do automatically kick into high lamp mode for HDR. You would need to use the high lamp mode for HDR with what is the equivalent of a 150-inch 16:9 screen. You really wouldn't get any HDR performance at all without it going into high lamp mode. And in high lamp mode, yeah, you're gonna hear the fan. I mean, you sound like you're critical of that in particular, and it's going to be there. It's a shame because, I mean, the JVC projectors are hands down the best projector choice for HDR. They have the frame-by-frame analysis of HDR signals that allows them to tone map it wonderfully better than any other projector that's out there. So it's a bit of a shame that, kicking it into high lamp mode, it might make it so that you don't want to use HDR. It's tough to say. I mean, my instinct is kind of to tell you to go with the NX7 anyway. The NX9, again, it's all about that lens. So if you've got the money to spend on it, it's like 3 times the price of the NX7. It's, getting up there to $18,000. But if you have the money to spend on it, it's a tremendous projector. Yeah, it's really tough. I don't really want to tell you to get any other projector for HDR because the JVCs are just so much better at HDR. But you almost can't avoid that high lamp mode, and you are going to hear it. Man, given that that's the case, what do we do here? This is really tough. I mean, it's really tough for me to say. I would live with it because for the image quality, to me, it's totally worth it. But you seem to be really bothered by this idea. Putting you'd have to build a hush box around it. It's only 4 feet behind you. It's a large projector. It would be a large hush box. Not inexpensive to construct that around it. That kind of would be the thing, but I have to agree. In high lamp mode, it's definitely louder than the Sony. It's louder than itself when it's in low lamp mode. It is a consideration. Man, could you move your mount? Could you use a hush box? Giving up the HDR would be such a shame, Christian. I'm sorry I don't have better news than that, but there isn't like a better alternative. I mean, even the Sony 4K HDR projectors, you'd want them in high lamp mode too, and there's no question that they're louder at that point, and they don't handle HDR as well as the JVC does. So you're going to have to make that choice there. Consider altering your mount or adding a hush box because it'd be such a shame to give up the HDR performance. Okay, let's go on to Jeremy, who is in France. First of all, Jeremy wanted to say thank you very much for our previous discussion of his home theater plans. He went to the Klipsch Design Center in France, and we thought that their proposals were really quite reasonable, but we hated their suggestion of an in-wall subwoofer. We're like, no in-wall subwoofer for you. And we pointed him to a Denon X3600H receiver instead of the Yamaha models that had been suggested, because the Yamaha models that were suggested weren't capable of going to more than 7 speakers, and he wanted a 5.2.4 setup. So we're like, yeah, doesn't make sense to go with the Yamahas that were mentioned that top out at 7 speakers max. Anyway, he's going with our advice on both of those fronts. Now he wants to nail down some additional details. So from the suggestions from his local store, not the Klipsch Design Center, they were suggesting some in-wall speaker options. He was considering Klipsch, he was considering Focal, and he was considering Dali. Are there any other brands that he should be sure to consider before he makes his final decision? The one I would tell you is KEF. I really, really like Kef's in-wall offerings. They do offer backer boxes that can be installed. Really good sound quality, good value, definitely available all over the world. So if you're going to have the chance to audition some speakers, you want to make sure these really are your favorite. I wouldn't overlook Kef. I would give them a try. But I like the Klipsch offerings very much too. And for the space that you're dealing with, I think the Klipsch's are a really, really appropriate choice. So unless you hear them and hate them, I'm in favor of sticking with your Klipsch plan. But if you're going auditioning, then include Kef in there because they could work very nicely for you. I like their sound quality. Next question. The Klipsch Design Center proposal was to use Reference Premiere Pro 250 in-wall speakers across the front and the Pro 180 speakers for the surrounds, which will be in his back wall since his left side is completely open. There's nothing over there to install speakers, and there's a large window on his right side, also making it difficult to install speakers. So we were like, yep, their design is reasonable. They're going to go on the back wall wide apart. It makes sense to put your surrounds there 5.2.4. So those Pro 250 speakers, they use two 5.25-inch drivers, one above and below the tweeter, and then the Pro 180 uses a single 8-inch woofer. There's also the Pro 160 in the lineup. That's a single 6.5-inch woofer. So the Pro 250s cost a bit more than the Pro 180s. The Pro 180s cost a little bit more than the Pro 160s. What do we think is actually the best combination of speakers to use for his 5 floor-level in-wall speakers? He is willing to pay a bit extra if it will be worth it. So yeah, be a little bit cautious with those Pro 180s because, you're just looking at the image. They look reasonable, but it's an 8-inch woofer. They are sizable speakers. Now, given the distances that you're dealing with and this room size, so we want to consider sort of mid-bass output from your speakers, I think those Pro 180s are a very appropriate choice for your surround speakers because they're going a fair distance behind him in his setup. And you want to have the output capability and you want to have the mid-range, the mid-bass output capability from those. And you've got the space to install them. So the Pro 180s as your surrounds makes a lot of sense. The Pro 250s across the front actually aren't even quite as efficient as the Pro 180 because their dual 5.25-inch drivers don't quite equal the surface area of a single 8-inch driver. They're a little bit closer. They're like a tiny step up from the single 6.5-inch driver in the Pro 160. So if you were thinking that you wanted to use Pro 180s across the front, it would actually be a little bit of a cost savings, but I think very appropriate. They're actually a little bit more efficient and a little bit more mid-bass output, both of which you could benefit from in your room size. The only question is the look. If you don't like the larger, almost more square-shaped look, and again, you've got to realize that they are like a little over 10 inches from side to side because it's an 8-inch woofer in there. So it might be an aesthetic concern. That might be one of the reasons why the Pro 250s were suggested instead, just because they look slimmer and taller. So up front, they sort of have that visual appeal. But you know what? If you're going to be painting the grills and blending these into your front wall where you barely see them at all anyway, I actually think the Pro 180s make a heck of a lot of sense here. You're saving a little bit money and actually getting a little bit higher output and in that mid-bass as well, both of which are beneficial to you. So consider that. We said to consider Klipsch subwoofers since we expect that SVS costs more in France. We also said that a fairly large subwoofer could potentially be used as an end table, and he is now strongly considering that. So there are the 15-inch Klipsch SPL 150 subs. They cost 850 euros in France. It's a ported design. The specs say they play down to 18 hertz, and the closest SVS model to that 850 euro price point is the SB2000, and it goes for 900 euros. So it's smaller, it's sealed, and it's a little bit more expensive. Should he go for those much bigger, physically, Klipsch speakers, or is SVS still worth it in this case? In this case, in this open room size, and if you can use the Klipsch as an end table, you get the bigger 15-inch Klipsch. That is absolutely the way to go in this scenario. I mean, if you were spending a lot more and getting one of the big, ported 3000 series from SVS, sure, but it's way more expensive. So I think we were spot on with that advice there. And if the big 15-inch Klipsch sub, you're like, you know what, big is actually good in this case because I can use it as an end table. Like, yeah, that's absolutely the way to go. And again, you're actually saving a little bit of money, so no complaints. Will dual Klipsch SPL 150 subs be sufficient for this open room? As a reminder, they're never expecting to play things particularly loud. They want clear vocals and relatively lower volume levels. That's the preference for playback. So will it be okay to start with one of the 15-inch subs, add the second one later as budget allows? Yeah, you're going to be fine in both cases. Technically, this is a 400-watt 15-inch sub with a big cabinet. So you're getting the help of the big cabinet and the ported design, but the 400-watt amplifier is not like the biggest amplifier ever. So full reference volume in this room size might not be possible, even with the 15-inch driver, but I'm worried about the extension more. Ported is definitely the way you want to go in this room. It has the higher efficiency thanks to the large box and the large driver. So yeah, you're going to be fine. Full reference volume, maybe you're not going to be able to hit just objectively, but that is absolutely a great choice. And by all means, start with one and add the second one later. You're going to get the benefit of more uniform bass when you add that second one, but you can certainly start by enjoying one for the time being if budget doesn't allow you to get two right away. He'll want to use a wireless subwoofer connection kit. Klipsch sells one, so should he just go with that, or is there something different that he should get? You know what? I strongly suspect you're going to end up getting everything from Klipsch. Go ahead and get their wireless subwoofer kit as well. Is it the cheapest one out there? No, but it is a good quality one. It's solid. I'm sure they can deliver a packaged price if you're going to be getting, let's say, two 15-inch subs and 9 speakers all from them. I'm sure they can work out to include the wireless subwoofer connection kit for you at a good price as a package deal. So yeah, stick with the Klipsch there. Finally, the Klipsch plan includes 4 in-ceiling speakers for Atmos. Is there any reason he should maybe consider 6 overhead speakers? He could add front heights to his front wall, he's thinking. Well, that would be a major AV receiver or pre-pro upgrade too. It's not an inconsequential thing to go from 4 overheads to 6. Only the Denon X8500H or Marantz AV8805 Pre-Pro can do 6 overheads in those lineups. Otherwise, you're going over to pre-pros from companies like Arcam or Monoprice, and shipping from Monoprice all the way to France would add costs there. So you're probably looking at the Arcam in that type of case. Yeah, that's a big price delta between your X3600. So also, in your seating arrangement, you don't need 6 overheads like at all. So I say stick with the plan of 4. I don't think 6 overheads are the way to go here. It's another time for a drink break. My mouth is getting parched. Bear with me, folks. Alrighty. Let's see what kind of time we're dealing with here. My goodness. We're going to go for about another 20 minutes. That should get us some more questions. Let's see what's next. All right. Karl. Sound and Vision posted an editorial in which they ponder, are the days of high-end video projection numbered? They are, of course, referring to the introduction of micro-LED modular displays, but also the large growth in sales of 75-inch and larger flat panels, and they noted how affordable 82 and 85-inch models have become. So what do we think? Will projection eventually go away entirely, or will there always be a place for it in home theater? Okay, well, these micro LED displays are super expensive. I don't know how rapidly prices are going to come down. They will come down over time. There's no question about that. If you can start getting micro LED displays, these modular ones, down to a very reasonable price point where you could install a 100 or 120 inch micro LED display for $3,000. Like, yeah, at that point, what is the incentive to go with a projector? But I think it's going to be a long time before we get to those type of price points at those types of sizes. Certainly anyone who was considering like a 92-inch, maybe even a 100-inch projection screen, I think already is looking at these 85-inch flat panels and being like, they don't cost more than the projector I was going to get anyway. I don't have to have a separate screen. I can use them with the lights on. I think that's already coming into play. Will projection ever entirely go away. I could see it at some point. If we get to the point where either modular displays or like truly rollable, you could install them on the wall like wallpaper, displays, if those become truly affordable, then I don't see really what the incentive for projection will be at that point. But I think that is way in the future. I think that's more than 10 years in the future. So certainly for anyone today, there's no way to get that image size that projection offers. I think there's healthy life in projection yet, but eventually, one day, yes, I could see projection going away. All right, Brandon N. Brandon started out with golden ear speakers all around. He went with in-wall side surround speakers, but there were studs right where his ideal locations would be, so he installed them a little farther back. It was fine at the time. They were still within the Dolby guidelines, but then he changed to a projector and an Atmos setup, and to get everything aligned the way he wanted, he moved his seats a little farther forward. So now his in-wall side surrounds, if he measures them, they're at 130 degrees from center. They're 40 degrees back from, the straight to his sides 90-degree angle. That would be recommended in like a 7-speaker setup. So he's currently auditioning a pair of Ascend Sierra Tower speakers, and he likes them better than his golden ear speakers. He's strongly considering making a speaker switch. But if he goes with the front speaker replacement, he isn't sure that he's going to keep his golden ear in-wall side surround speakers. If he ends up replacing those two, he'd potentially have the option to now move the location of his side surround speakers, but he would still want to stick with in-walls. So he doesn't intend to ever have surround backs. Find out later he actually has an open back wall. He has no back wall directly behind him, so that makes sense. So would it be worth it to move his side surround speakers farther forward? Would that be a benefit to him in his 5.2.4 Atmos speaker setup? All right, so in a 5.2.4 configuration, Dolby themselves would have you position your surround speakers at 120 degrees. So they wouldn't have them straight to the sides. They would have them a little ways behind you. That is standard. And you're at 130. We know that moving them a little bit farther forward would put them at the stud, so you'd have to put them in front of the stud, and that's getting very close to directly to your sides. I've got to be honest with you here and say I would probably keep your side surrounds exactly where they are. Given that you're not going to have surround backs, I don't necessarily want my side surrounds when I'm dealing with only 5 floor-level speakers and not 7 to be straight to my sides. I'd have them at that 110 to 120 degree azimuth, from 0 degrees being straight ahead center. I would have them that little ways behind me. And 130, that's not so far back that I'm really going to be critical of that. My honest opinion is that you keep them where they are. So do the surround back channels in the recordings of 7 dot whatever recordings, do those sounds just get mixed down into the surround speakers in a 5.2.4 configuration? If so, does it make sense to keep the surround speakers farther back than Dolby's guidelines anyway? Well, yeah, those sounds do just get mixed down into your surround speakers. Those are the only speakers available to play them. You don't lose any sounds. They don't just vanish. They do get played out of the side surround speakers that you have instead. And like I say, Dolby's guidelines are to have it at 120 anyway, so they already want the speakers farther back than if you have 7 speakers. If you have 7 speakers, they want your side surrounds at 90 to 110 degrees, so right beside you or just a little bit back behind you. But when you only have 5, they want them at 120 anyway, so it totally makes sense that they're going to be farther back versus if you had 7 speakers. And yes, that's where the surround back channel information now comes from. His Atmos speakers are at 45-degree elevation angles in front and behind him. Perfect. Should he relabel them as heights instead of tops? Because, of course, he labeled them as front tops and front rears, as you would expect to from the Dolby Atmos setups. I'm going to tell you yes. He has a Marantz SR7011. I'm going to tell you yes. Go ahead and relabel them as front heights and rear heights. They will still totally work perfectly for Atmos, but now when you're listening to DTS-X soundtracks, the sounds will be discrete in those overhead speakers instead of being partially mixed into your fronts and partially mixed into, in your case, your surrounds, because you don't have surround backs. So yeah, I'm going to tell you, go ahead and relabel them as front heights and rear heights, but You will have to rerun Odyssey. When you relabel speakers, you don't get to keep your old Odyssey setup. So you'll have to rerun it. It's a little bit of a hassle, but I say go for it. His center speaker has to go below his TV, but it has to go above his fireplace. He's got some size constraints, but he's actually more concerned about the front to back depth of his center speaker, not the height so much. He's got room. So the normal Ascend Sierra Horizon center speaker is just too big. But he knows that David Fabricant over there at Ascend is totally willing to make custom cabinets to fit the dimensions. In fact, my custom center Horizon speaker was brought up, and he's like, yeah, actually those dimensions would work really well. I got it down to 7.5 inches front to back instead of like over a foot as the normal Horizon is. So he's considering that, but there's another alternative. RBH has their Signature Series, and they have on-wall versions of their Signature Series. They have the SV661W or the SV661W/R for the Reference Series version. He's saying that would be just about the perfect size because it's this on-wall model that is thinner from front to back, but it's got the design where it's a tweeter in the middle of woofers on either side. It's, that horizontally turned Dapolito array. It's not a tweeter above a mid-range like the Horizon is, and it's not the elevated tweeter position as the normal cabinet Signature Series or Signature Reference RBH speakers use. They have woofer on either side, but the tweeter is elevated so that it's not right in the middle. They're trying to get rid of as much of that comb filtering and lobing interference that happens when you go woofer, tweeter, woofer in a horizontal array. So what do we think? He's about 15 feet away from his front speakers. Should he switch to RBH from Ascend? Should he go with their on-wall Signature Center? Or should he get Dave to build him a custom Horizon cabinet over at Ascend? Ooh, this is tough. This is a tough one. The safe answer is to tell you to audition because hopefully you can find an RBH dealer who would allow you to audition that on-wall Signature Series speaker. They are great speakers, but I kind of agree with you that they're meant to be used vertically. That is really the way they're meant to be used. They are a true Dapolito array. They're meant to be used vertically with the woofer above the tweeter and the woofer below the tweeter, vertically aligned like that. You turn them horizontal, and if you're sitting to your left or right off axis, you're going to get some of that comb filtering and lobing effect. It's just what's going to happen. But it sure sounds like your room is kind of narrow because he's like, I need in-wall side surrounds. The back is open. If you're mostly going to be front and center, you're not going to run into those problems of the, for you in your primary seat in the middle. You're not going to run into those comb filtering and lobing problems. So that's not really the issue. The price increases not insubstantially to get a custom Horizon center. It's a pretty, it's like adds about $750 to the price for that one-off custom cabinet. It might be even more now. At this point, he might have to charge even more. So it's not inconsequential to get it. If the RBH is going to fit much more easily and you're convinced that you're just not pleased with your existing golden ear speakers anymore, I would strongly consider it and try to get an audition because chances are it's going to actually be more cost effective and suit your needs very well. I'm certainly not going to tell you to strike it from your list of options and just go with Ascend. No, it could be much more viable to go RBH on wall in this case. So what about upgrading to the Sierra RAL with its full ribbon tweeter or the RBH Signature Reference with their folded ribbon tweeter? Is it worth saving up for the price difference, for that price increase? Ooh. Again, you know what? You've got to audition to tell for yourself. For me, it was totally worth it to go to those RAL ribbon tweeters. It took me to this uncanny, hard to describe sense of realism that I just don't hear from other tweeters for the most part. Some of the beryllium tweeters get kind of close. Some of the other ribbon tweeters get kind of close, but those RAL ribbon tweeters have something special. It's the hairs standing up, shivers down your spine, close your eyes and you could be truly convinced that it's a real sound and not a speaker producing sound. It's got that uncanny ability to it. I like it a whole lot. There's value there. You're not paying more for nothing. It's very compelling. So I'm going to tell you, audition. It could be worth it. It would mean saving up. But if you hear it and you're like, ooh, I've heard that now, I can't go back, then you'll know. His room is open at the back, as I've mentioned, so no surround back speakers. Obviously, with no back wall, he isn't putting any panels on the back wall of his room, but he also doesn't have a wall right there reflecting sound close to his ears, so that's all fine. Up at the front of the room, would it be best to use 2-inch absorption behind his front speakers, 4-inch absorption behind his front speakers, or some of the gig panels that have the scatter plate on the front? So it's a combo of absorption and diffusion. All right, so behind your speakers, I'm going to be telling you that basically, it's a little bit counterintuitive. The closer the back of your speaker is to the wall, the more I want you to have the ability to absorb bass. So the closer the back of your speakers is to your front wall, the more thickness I want in an absorption panel. And I'm going to leave it at absorption because the thing that I want to help negate is that boundary reinforcement, that mid-range and mid-bass reinforcement that comes from putting the backs of your speakers close to your walls. So the closer they are, the thicker absorption, and just stick to absorption. You don't really need diffusion on your front wall. Diffusion is about scattering higher frequencies, and that's more important on your ceiling especially, and then along your side walls, particularly like the area to your sides and behind you on your side walls, where you want that more diffuse scattering effect and less absorption back there. So traditionally, I'm like absorption on your front wall. I'm in favor of absorption on your side walls, especially when it's a narrower room, and I more want to lower the first reflections as opposed to just scatter them. And then diffusion, ceiling, diffusion on the side and back, sort of to your sides and behind you. And the closer your speakers are, the thicker that absorption should get. So since his room is open at the back, does he still need corner bass traps? Ooh, tough to know, tough to tell. Because your corner bass traps are primarily about that crossover region between your speakers and your subs. That's really where they're effective. And if you have problems in your frequency response or, your decay times in that critical crossover region, that's where bass trapping really helps you. It can be a little bit tough to tell just by ear, so I would encourage you to try and measure, actually. If you can measure some sweeps that are going from about 300 hertz down to about, let's just call it 60 or 40 hertz or something like that. You play some sweeps in that range and see what's happening in that crossover region from speakers to subs. If you're seeing problems in the frequency response or in the time domain in that region, then even though you have opening at your back, it still means that you want to try and tamp down the reflections that are happening in that range, and corner bass traps could help you there. So it's a bit of a it depends answer. You're more likely to get away with not having bass traps, just the more air that you have that you're dealing with, but it could certainly still be the case, and you'd sort of want to confirm with measurements if you could. All right, I still want to crack on because we have like 23 questions on this list, and I want to get through as many as possible so we don't have a huge backlog for next week. So I'm going to continue on here. Chris has been looking at both the BenQ HT3550 projector and the Epson 5050 UB projector. There's a pretty big price difference there. It's more than $1,000 right now. Do the benefits of the Epson justify that price difference? Would we recommend paying that greater than $1,000 price difference? And would professional calibration potentially be worth it for one of them but not the other? Okay, I think the differences are worth it. Just whole hog. The black level difference alone, the difference in on-screen contrast, it's just obvious. It's right there. It's plain as day to see. The black level on the HT3550, it's dark gray. That's all there is to it. And on the 5050 UB, you're getting close to a true black. It is a significant difference between the $1,500 4K projectors and the ultra black 5050 Epson. On that alone, I can basically justify it. The lens is better. The lens is motorized. You have way more zoom and lens shift. The color is stronger. The HDR performance is better, like significantly better. So yeah, I can absolutely justify that price differential, and I think it's worth it if you can afford it. I mean, sure, we'd all like to pay less, but no, it's absolutely worth it if you can get the 5050 UB. Professional calibration, I mean, I think professional calibration is worth it on most displays if you've never had one before. It becomes your frame of reference. And as we talked about last week, if you are careful, talk to your calibrator beforehand. If they're willing to like educate you along with doing the calibration, like there's tremendous value in that. So I would say it can be worth it for either of these. I wouldn't make the distinction that it's worth it for the 5050 but not for the BenQ or something. No, it could be worth it in either. It's more about you, how much experience you already have, how many displays have you seen fully calibrated in the past. If it's your first one and they're willing to offer some education as they do it, totally worth it in either case. Chris is a huge fan of 3D. Hey, there's the other guy. He's been enjoying his BenQ HT3550 projector and its clear 3D performance for several years. But now he has taken his theater room down to the studs and he's intending to install a new projector when the room is reconstructed. So obviously, the new projector is going to be 4K and HDR compatible. There are no 3D Ultra HD Blu-rays. There's only 1080p with standard dynamic range for 3D. So he's wondering, should he keep his BenQ HT2050 and just use it solely for 3D? He's thinking that way he could save hours on the lamp of his new projector, and he already has the glasses for his BenQ HT2050. If he goes for the 5050 UB, like I've now said is totally worth it, he'd need to buy new 3D glasses, but his BenQ 2050 is in need of a new lamp, so he's going to have to spend some money either way. Either he gets a new lamp and keeps the 2050 BenQ just for 3D, or he buys new 3D glasses and gets a 5050. So he wants to make this decision now, since his room is under construction, and if he's going to mount two projectors, he wants to plan ahead for that. Okay, you know what? I'm going to say you get the 5050, you buy the new 3D glasses, and you use the 5050 for everything. Because aside from the 3D, the advantages in black level are just, they're obvious. They're just plain obvious in 3D, in 2D, in HDR, in everything. And I don't think you're going to be totally satisfied for your 3D content now going back to your entry-level 1080p BenQ. Yeah, its 3D is clear, it's good on that, but once you see the contrast and black level difference of your 5050, you're not going to want to use the BenQ anymore. So I say you go the one projector, you make it the 5050, you buy new 3D glasses, and that's your projector now. Eric V, who wrote to us on Twitter, we've mentioned a few times now that it's best to keep the OLED light setting on LG OLED TVs at 40 on the dial. It goes from 0 to 100. Keep it at 40 or lower. But what about HDR? The OLED light setting automatically sets itself to 100 in HDR picture mode. So is that okay, or should we be manually lowering that down to 40? Good question, Eric. You leave it at 100. That is correct. The OLED light setting acts a little differently in HDR mode than it does in standard dynamic range picture modes. In the HDR mode, it is affecting the highlight level of light output. And at anywhere other than 100, it no longer tracks the electro-optical transfer function accurately. It should be set at 100. That will track the HDR curve of how much light should be coming out for a given signal level. It'll track that accurately when set to 100, and that's where it should be. The thing in HDR is that because the signal level means exactly a certain nit level, you're not adjusting the overall brightness of the image anymore. The signal level in HDR says when this is supposed to be 50 nits, it comes out as 50 nits, and changing the OLED light level doesn't alter that. It just clips off your highlights if you lower it from 100. So for HDR, you leave it at 100, but for your SDR picture modes, if you keep it at 40 or lower, that prevents the automatic brightness limiter from kicking in, and it'll help reduce the likelihood of any burn-in or image retention. So good question, good clarification, Eric. HDR, keep it at 100. Infinite Gary, because of course there's a question from Infinite Gary. When is there not? Gary was reading an article from Film Score magazine. It was from back in 2005. We'll have the link for what he was looking at. It's on page 49 if you want to see this article that he's referencing. They were discussing the topic of remastering audio. Now, naturally, they brought up the loudness wars from CD music releases, and they show a couple of waveform graphs to demonstrate how, like, every sound in a lot of CDs is pegged to the maximum. There's essentially no dynamic range in the CD at all. But then they turn to the topic of remastering movie soundtracks, because of course we see this on DVD, Blu-ray, Ultra HD Blu-ray releases. Sometimes they'll mark it how the audio has been remastered as well. And once again, they show a couple of waveforms, and unlike the music example, there's still a lot of dynamic range in the remastered movie soundtracks. But overall, the remastered versions, at least in their examples, are a bit louder throughout versus the original. And not only that, it's the music sections in particular where they appear to have a fair amount of dynamic range compression applied. Instead of like a slow building crescendo and then one loud fortissimo right at the end, which is what the original waveform showed, in the remastered version of their example, the music now crescendos very quickly early on, and then the entire last section is all at that fortissimo level of what was only at the very, very end in the original. So that was one example. It was back in 2005, but Gary wants to know if that's still common practice. Is that what a lot of the remastering audio is doing in movies that are coming out like just today? Or are they opting for greater dynamic range, including in the music portion of the movie's soundtrack? Well, I mean, it's all anecdotal to me. I don't have like hard data, Gary, to say one way or the other. But I will say, like, so particularly in the case of Disney, Disney is doing more dynamic range compression in their movie releases than ever. I mean, you can hear it on Disney Plus. You can hear it on their Ultra HD Blu-ray releases. Like the Marvel movies are good examples of this, horrible examples of how I don't want movie audio to be handled, because they are dynamically compressing movie soundtracks for the home releases. No question about it. I don't think every studio is doing it. Sony seems to be pretty darn good at keeping full dynamic range in their movie releases. Warner Brothers seems to be a little hit or miss. I mean, some of their mixing is a little bit strange. I've frequently mentioned like Wonder Woman, where they just don't seem to understand what object audio even was when they did that one. But as far as dynamic range goes, I haven't noticed a huge amount of compression in those releases. But I mean, I'm hearing more. I mean, since so much content is Disney now, I'm hearing more dynamic range compression in movie releases for the home versions than I've ever heard before. So unfortunately, I don't think the trend is toward retaining full dynamic range even in movie soundtracks. It seems like this compressing of the dynamic range, unfortunately, continues on in today. So yeah, not sure what we can do about that, but I think unfortunately that seems to be the trend, Gary. Okay, you know what? I might stop at Dennis M. I don't know. Let's see what I can do. Dennis M. Dennis has an Onkyo TX RZ730 receiver. It's got 9 amplifiers built in, but it can process up to 7.2.4. You would need to add an external amp to go to 11 speakers. But with its 9 built-in amplifiers, should he set up his speakers as 5.3.4, because yes, he is using 3 subwoofers, or as 7.3.2? Dennis, I think this is an easy answer in my opinion. 5.3.4. That is absolutely the way that I would tell you to go. If you're going to do Atmos, if you're going to do DTSX, if you're going to do immersive audio, I want you to have 4 overhead speakers. There is no way to do front to back panning above you without 4 overheads. So to me, easy answer, 5.3.4. All right, that was really short, so I think our last question for this week is going to be from Yanick D. For Yanick's 7.2.4 speaker setup, he has a Marantz SR6011. But for 2-channel music, he loves his Parasound New Classic 200 integrated stereo amp. It has a home theater bypass input, so he uses it as the external amplifier for his front, left, right speakers. That allows his Marantz SR6011 to power the other 9 speakers in his 7.2.4 setup. So he subscribes to Apple Music, and he'd like to play that directly through his Parasound integrated amp without the Marantz being involved at all. He can sort of do that now. He connected an old Apple TV 3, third generation. That still had an optical audio output, so that's what he's connected to his Parasound. But the Apple TV 3 doesn't natively support Apple Music, so he uses his iPhone or his iPad and then sends the Apple Music content from his mobile device via AirPlay to his Apple TV 3. Well, he owns an Apple TV 4K that has Apple Music directly on it, and if he's going to use that, he wants to be able to see its video so that he can navigate on that. He won't be looking on his mobile device anymore. But of course, the Apple TV 4K only has an HDMI output, and his Parasound doesn't have an HDMI input, so there's no way to connect the Apple TV 4K directly to his Parasound. So he's wondering, could he plug his Apple TV 4K into an HDMI audio extractor? Now, when he wants to use his Marantz for his full surround sound setup, he'd want this audio extractor to pass through full 4K with HDR and Dolby Atmos bit streams and full quality audio. Wants all that to pass through this audio extractor to his Marantz. But then, when it's 2-channel audio time for Amazon Music, could he switch the extractor so that it's now using its optical audio output, and that he would connect to his Parasound? He's wondering, since he wants to be able to see the video, he'd be turning the Marantz on still, and then that, would that override somehow? Would the audio extractor look at that and be like, oh, I have to pass all the audio through to the Marantz now? Or can he set it to still use its optical output? Okay, so on most of the audio extractors, HDMI audio extractors that I've ever seen, you basically choose, right? You choose where the audio goes within the audio extractor itself. So you can have an HDMI connection, but then the audio is always being extracted and sent out of the optical output. So I think that signal change should work, but you would manually be shifting back and forth between where does the audio get sent. Do I use the extraction part of it and use the optical connection, or do I pass everything through the HDMI port? You would, of course, want to make sure it's a full 18 gigabits per second that supports Dolby Vision and 4K HDR signal pass-through, but there are HDMI audio extractors that can do that. But there's another way that you could come at this, which is you could plug the Apple TV 4K directly into Marantz. And of course, I'm going to tell you that if you were to just use the Zone 2 output of your Marantz to feed your Parasound, or in fact, just leave things as they are, where it's your front, left, right pre-outs that are plugged into your Parasound anyway, but you would make the manual change inside the Apple TV 4K and now tell it to just output stereo signal. That having that being sent as analog out of your Marantz into your Parasound is going to be totally fine. But he's like, I don't want the Marantz involved in the audio signal chain at all. I'm going to tell you that objectively speaking, there's no reason why you should actually need the Parasound, but he is convinced. He said in his email that he hears this night and day difference. He doesn't want the Marantz involved in the audio. Okay, I'm not going to fight about that with you. What you could do, the Marantz would still end up being powered on, but you could plug the Apple TV 4K into your Marantz, and then you could use the Marantz's HDMI Zone 2 output. All right, that is just going to whatever came in via HDMI to the HDMI input is being sent out of the Zone 2 HDMI output. You could connect your audio extractor to that, because if what you're worried about is I don't want the Marantz's DACs involved, but I also don't want this headache of switching the audio extractor back and forth. Well, if you use the HDMI Zone 2 output of the Marantz, and that is what feeds the HDMI signal into your HDMI audio extractor, now you never have to change anything on the HDMI audio extractor. When it's Marantz surround sound time, you just don't turn on Zone 2 HDMI, and when it's Parasound time, you turn on the HDMI Zone 2 output, and everything will be switched to automatically be a compatible signal with everything that's attached HDMI wise. So that should work. So I think that's actually the signal path. I mean, again, I'm going to tell you there's no need to do that. The DACs and the Marantz are great. I'm going to tell you don't need the Parasound at all, to be frank, but I will refrain from fighting on that. I say to use the HDMI Zone 2 because you have one. And then you don't have to constantly manually switch settings. All righty. Woo! That was a heck of a lot of talking and not a lot of breaks for me. But we made it. We answered a lot of questions. We have left on our list Damien D, Andrew B, which is a long question. Let me scroll down past Andrew B there to get to Francis A, who wrote to us on Facebook, and Greg C. Those are all the folks left on our list. We'll get to you next week, and hopefully Tom will be able to stick around for a significant portion of the podcast. He was called away on an important thing there. So no worries there. Hope everything's going well, Tom. We'll see you back next week. Let's go back up and thank our listeners of the week. Didn't have any PayPal donations, but if you'd like to make one, come to avrant.com, our website, and you can make a PayPal donation there over on the right-hand side where it says support AVRant. Want to thank our 106 Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up, $1 per month automatically withdrawn and given to us if you want to do that, or more than $1 if you want to be generous. Thanks very much, 106 patrons. We want to thank Tony. He talked us up to SVS via a very nice email, and Joe talked us up to SVS as well, and congrats on your purchases. I'm sure you're enjoying those products. All right, let's see what other images did I not get through. Oh, no, we're doing all right there. Those are all related to our last questions. So if you want your question answered on this podcast, normally by two people, not just me talking to myself here. Normally, there's more opinions than just mine going on. You send your questions via email to question@avrant.com. Please do use the email. It makes my life organizing these questions so much easier. So question@avrant.com. Alrighty, well, this has been AVRant. On behalf of Tom Andry, I am Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.